I was 15 the summer Bellweather reached a population of 0, and according to every record anyone has ever found, nobody left. That sentence sounds like a trick. It is not. No houses were sold. No school transcripts were transferred. No mail was forwarded. No missing person reports were filed. The utility company never closed an account, and the county never recorded a death. 2017 residents remained listed at the same addresses, paying the same bills, driving the same roads, and appearing in the same family photographs. Years later, when I tried to explain what happened, a state investigator showed me copies of those records and asked me the same question 6 different ways. If the population reached 0, where did everyone go? I told him they did not go anywhere. Their bodies stayed. The investigator stopped writing after that. I want to say up front that I am not the person you would choose to notice something like this. I was not the kid who read old books or fixed radios or kept careful notes. I was a normal 15-year-old, which mostly meant I was bored, hungry, half asleep, and thinking about a girl named Kesia who worked the counter at the swim center. I did not notice what happened to Bellweather because I was clever. I noticed because I was a kid, and kids feel things in their bodies before adults teach them to distrust the feeling. The whole thing was a body feeling long before it became a story I could tell. Bellweather was small, but it was not dying. That matters. When people hear about a strange little town, they picture an abandoned main street, a rusted sign, and weeds pushing through a gas station lot. Bellweather was nothing like that. We had a high school, a swim center, a diner, 2 churches that disliked each other, and a Friday market around the courthouse square. We had a summer baseball league where I played a bad second base. We had sprinklers ticking over front lawns, kids riding bikes until the street lights came on, and an ice cream truck that played the same 4 notes until you wanted to throw something at it. The town was full. It was loud. It looked alive right up to the end, and then it kept looking alive after the end had already happened. It started for me with my dad at dinner. We ate together most nights, my mother, my father, my 9-year-old sister Junie, and me, at a square kitchen table with one short leg that my dad had been promising to fix for 3 years. On a Tuesday in June, he sat across from me eating pork chops and talking about drainage on the back field. He maintained the athletic grounds for the school district, and drainage was the subject to which every conversation eventually returned. I was nodding without listening when the skin at the back of my neck tightened. You know the feeling that someone is standing behind you. Your body notices before you turn. This was the opposite. My father was directly in front of me, close enough that I could see a spot of gravy on his thumb, but the animal part of me that kept track of whether I was alone said, quietly and completely, "There is no one across the table." I looked at him. He cut another piece of pork. "You listening, Deck?" "Yeah." "What did I just say?" "Northfield floods." "Backfield," Junie laughed. Mom told her not to talk with food in her mouth. Dad shook his head at me in exactly the way he always did, patient and mildly disappointed. Nothing in his face was wrong. Nothing in his voice was wrong. He was warm when his arm brushed mine, reaching for the potatoes. Still, the chair across from me felt empty. I assumed something was wrong with me. You always do that first. I thought I was getting sick or having one of those moments when a familiar word suddenly stops looking real. My eyes told me my father was there. My skin told me he was not. I trusted my eyes because that is what sensible people are taught to do. I am telling you now, trust your skin. Your skin knew how to recognize another person for 100,000 years before your eyes learned to read a face. When they disagree, your skin is not always the part being fooled. Dad continued as if nothing had happened. He went to work. He called me kiddo. He complained about my grades and fell asleep in the recliner with baseball on television. He still laughed at the same advertisements. He still whistled the first half of an old country song while shaving, then forgot the second half in the same place every morning. But the hymn of him was gone. That was the first way I understood it. A person has weight in a room, not physical weight, a felt one. You can close your eyes while your mother is standing behind you and know the room is occupied. A person you love is like a small sun. You do not stare directly at it every second, but its warmth tells you where it is. Dad still had body heat. I checked by hugging him for longer than I had since I was a child. He patted my back and asked whether I needed money. His shirt smelled like grass and gasoline. His heart beat against my cheek. The hallway around him felt cold. I began testing myself. I would stand outside a room with my eyes closed and try to tell whether anyone was inside. With Junie, I knew before I touched the door. She filled a room carelessly, the way music leaks under a door. With Mom, at first, there was a soft pressure I had known all my life. With Dad, nothing. I could open my eyes and find him inches away, and my body would flinch because an empty room had produced a man. 4 days after that dinner, I came home from baseball practice and found Mom at the sink. Before I entered the kitchen, I stopped. There was no small sun beyond the doorway. She was washing a plate. Water ran over her fingers. The radio played an afternoon call-in show. She turned, smiled, and asked if I wanted a sandwich. I backed into the wall hard enough to knock a framed photograph crooked. "Declan? I'm fine. You look pale. Practice." She dried her hands and put her palm against my forehead. The gesture was so exactly hers that for 1 second I almost rejected what my body knew. Her thumbnail had the same pale ridge. She smelled like lemon soap. She called me honey. But there was no one behind the gesture. She made my lunch the next morning and put a note inside the bag, as she had done since kindergarten. "Love you, work hard." Her handwriting leaned to the right. The O in love was too large, just like always. I stared at it during lunch until the blue ink blurred. Then I locked myself in a bathroom stall and cried into my shirt so no one would hear me. The note was perfect. That was what broke me. It was not a threatening note or a message asking for help. It was the exact shape of my mother's love with no source behind it, like a footprint with no foot. I want to be careful here because it is easy to make the emptied people sound like monsters. They were not. Dad was not cruel. Mom's eyes did not turn black. Neither of them spoke in riddles. They were nice. They were exactly as nice as they had always been. That was worse. Cruelty would have given me something to resist. A monster can be avoided. A monster can be named. What remained of my parents did not want anything from me. It simply continued. On Thursday, Dad repaired the short table leg. He had promised to do it for 3 years. After he was emptied, he did it without being asked. He turned the table over, measured the wobble, cut a thin square of wood, and glued it in place. When he finished, he called us to admire the work. Mom said, "Finally." They both laughed. I stood in the doorway and understood something that frightened me more than their emptiness. Whatever remained was not deteriorating. It was improving the routine. The table never wobbled again. It did not happen to everyone at once. If it had, someone would have screamed, and this would have been a faster story. The emptying moved one person at a time, quietly enough that the people still capable of noticing assumed the fault was in themselves. Once someone went empty, they could no longer feel that anyone else was empty. The missing part of them was the same part that recognized presence in another person. Dad looked at Mom and saw his wife. Mom looked at Dad and saw her husband. Neither could feel the cold space where the other had been. Those who were still present mostly kept silent. Imagine being surrounded by smiling people who insist everything is normal while your own body tells you there is no one inside them. Imagine wondering whether saying it aloud will prove you are insane. That was how Bellweather defended what was happening. It did not need secrecy. It used embarrassment. For almost 2 weeks, I thought I was the only one left who could feel the difference. Then I saw Kesia at the swim center. I had gone there because Junie wanted to swim and Mom had driven us, though by then riding beside Mom felt like sitting in a car that drove itself. The lobby smelled of chlorine and wet concrete. Kesia sat behind the counter reading a college brochure she had hidden inside a magazine. She was 16, wore a red staff shirt, and had a narrow white scar through one eyebrow. I had known all of those facts for months. I had never before noticed how much space a living person occupied. I felt her from across the lobby. Warmth, pressure, a human being. My knees nearly gave out. She looked up. "You okay?" Instead of saying something normal, I asked, "Can you tell when a room is empty?" She stared at me. Then her eyes shifted past my shoulder to my mother. Mom was helping Junie tighten a swim cap. She smiled at Kesia and waved. Kesia's face lost its color. "Sometimes," she whispered. That was the first time either of us admitted it. We met behind the pump house while Junie swam. Kesia kept her arms folded tight across her chest. She asked when I had noticed. I told her about Dad, then Mom. She told me her grandfather had become quiet in May. Her parents said grief was making her strange. The week before, her manager had stopped feeling present halfway through a shift. He had been checking chlorine logs when Kesia walked past him and felt the room go cold. "He didn't even pause," she said. "He finished the number." "Did you see it happen?" "No. I felt the before and the after." That difference mattered later. We did not know what caused it. We made the guesses frightened teenagers make because guessing feels like action. Something in the water, a gas leak, a disease. We compared addresses. Her grandfather lived north of town. My parents lived south. The swim manager drank bottled water. Dad did not. There was no useful pattern. Kesia had made a list of people she could still feel. She kept it folded behind the battery in her phone case. There were 32 names. I knew maybe half. My best friend Tobin was on it. So was Pastor Vale from the smaller church, Mrs. Albright at the pharmacy, Coach Mendez, and a 7-year-old girl Kesia knew from swimming lessons. 32 out of 2,000? I asked. 32, I checked. The distinction comforted me for about 10 seconds. After that, I started keeping my own tally. I tested people without telling them. At baseball practice, I closed my eyes while Coach Mendez walked behind the line of players. His presence moved across my back like shade. He was still there. Tobin was still there too, bright and restless, talking about saving money for a dirt bike his mother had forbidden him to buy. The next Monday, Coach Mendez hit grounders to us under a white afternoon sun. He slapped the ball into the dirt, yelled at me to stay low, and praised Tobin's throw. At first base, I realized the field felt empty. Coach stood behind home plate with the bat on his shoulder. "Again," he called. He looked and sounded exactly the same, but the man who had known every one of us since Little League was gone. He hit perfect ground ball after perfect ground ball, each one placed with mechanical patience. Practice ran 11 minutes longer than usual. No one complained, except Tobin. When we packed our gloves, I asked him if Coach felt strange. Tobin glanced toward the plate. Coach was collecting balls into a bucket, humming. "Like he's far away," Tobin said. Hearing someone else say it almost made me sick with relief. For a while there were 3 of us. We did not become heroes. We had no secret headquarters, no equipment, no adult willing to believe us. We were teenagers comparing body feelings behind the swim center and in the last booth at Ferris's Diner. We agreed on a few facts. Emptied people slept, ate, worked, and remembered. They could answer questions about their childhoods. They could become angry if a routine called for anger, and affectionate if a routine called for affection. They did not improvise well, but most daily life required less improvisation than we had imagined. The emptying did not alter memory. It removed ownership. Mr. Ferris proved that. He had run the diner for 30 years and knew what regular customers wanted before they sat down. One Friday, I entered and felt nothing. Every booth was occupied. Plates clinked. A baby cried. Mr. Ferris moved behind the counter pouring coffee, and the whole room felt like a stage after the actors had left. Kesia was already in our booth. She had tears in her eyes. "All of them?" I asked. "Everyone except us." Mr. Ferris came over with 3 sodas we had not ordered. "Same as last week," he said cheerfully. Tobin looked at the glasses. "I had root beer last week." Mr. Ferris smiled. "Same as last week. This is cola." The smile remained, friendly and patient. "Same as last week." Then he walked away. It was the first visible mistake any emptied person made. Small, harmless, almost nothing. The routine had preserved the gesture but lost the reason beneath it. Tobin wanted to tell the police. We went to the station that afternoon. The desk officer listened while Tobin described people acting wrong. I watched the officer's pen move. The room was cold before we entered. When Tobin finished, the officer asked if we had taken any drugs. "No." "Are any of these people threatening you?" "No." "Have they hurt themselves or someone else?" "No." "Then what exactly are you reporting?" Tobin opened his mouth. There was no sentence that would survive being said aloud. We left. Outside, Kesia tore her list in half, then immediately knelt to collect the pieces from the sidewalk. She taped them together that night. The church choir disappeared next. I do not know whether it happened one singer at a time or all during the same hymn. On Sunday morning, I passed the larger church and heard them through the open doors. Their harmony was beautiful. The organ rose beneath them, and sunlight colored the floor through stained glass. The building felt as empty as a barn. I stood on the sidewalk listening to 24 bodies sing about being known by God. Every voice entered at the right moment. Every face lifted on the same final note. When they finished, the congregation applauded and the choir smiled. No one had heard anyone sing. I sat on the curb until the service ended. People walked around me, shaking hands, making lunch plans, asking about my parents. Their shadows crossed my shoes. Not one of them pressed against the world. That afternoon, the population on Bellweather's municipal sign still read 2017. The number became an obsession. I began counting how many real people remained instead of how many had gone. 32 on Kesia's list became 26, then 19. Mrs. Albright at the pharmacy vanished from the room while handing Kesia change. Pastor Vale went cold in the middle of a conversation about fear. The 7-year-old swimmer lasted longer than both of her parents, then one morning stood beside the pool waiting for a lesson and felt like an abandoned towel. The count went the wrong direction. I understood, without any expert explaining it, what population 0 would mean. It would not mean an empty street. It would mean 2,000 bodies mowing lawns, making lunches, filling prescriptions, and stopping at red lights, with not one actual person inside any of it. Bellweather would become a perfect working machine built from human habits. The lights would remain on. The sprinklers would keep turning. The ice cream truck would play its 4 notes to children who ran toward it because that was what summer children did. Junie was the reason I did not give up. She was 9 and more present than anyone I had ever known, a loud, bright bonfire of a person. As Bellweather went cold, her presence grew stronger by contrast. I could feel her through a wall. She sang wrong lyrics, invented insults, changed her favorite color twice in one afternoon, and asked questions no adult wanted to answer. She could feel the emptied people, too. One night she climbed into my bed. She had not done that in years. "Deck," she whispered, "is Mom real?" I did not lie. It is the one thing in this story I know I did completely right. Not the way she was. Is she dead? I don't think so. Then where is she? I don't know. Junie was quiet for a long time. In the hall, Mom's footsteps stopped outside my door. The handle turned. She looked in and saw us awake. "Bad dream?" she asked. "Junie had one," I said. Mom crossed the room, tucked the blanket around Junie, and kissed her forehead. Junie gripped my wrist so hard her nails hurt. "Love you both," Mom said. "Love you," Junie answered automatically. After the door closed, she began to cry, without making a sound. "Are we going to go empty too?" "I don't know. I'd rather die." "Don't say that." "I'd rather anything." I held her and felt the whole furious person of her in my arms. I promised whatever was happening would not take her. It was a promise made by a 15-year-old with no plan. I searched for causes because causes can be fought. I broke into Dad's work shed and checked chemical labels. Tobin stole water test strips from the pool. Kesia spent 2 hours using the library computer to search for gas leaks, mass dissociation, carbon monoxide, contaminated reservoirs, and every disease she could spell. We found nothing. There was no mine under Bellweather, no factory spill, no new radio tower, no shared medication, no weather event. People went empty indoors and outdoors, awake and asleep, young and old. The phenomenon did not follow roads, family lines, water pipes, or church membership. But it did follow something. Kesia noticed first. The people who went earliest had become quiet inside before they became empty. That did not mean sad or lonely. It meant they lived almost entirely by repetition. Dad and his drainage reports. Mr. Ferris and the same eggs on the same grill. The choir singing words their mouths knew better than their minds. The people still present wanted things. Tobin wanted his dirt bike with religious intensity. Kesia wanted to leave Bellweather and study architecture in a city where nobody knew her grandfather. Junie wanted a horse, purple hair, a telescope, and to become a veterinarian or an astronaut depending on the hour. I wanted Kesia. I wanted my parents back. I wanted my life to begin somewhere beyond the municipal sign. We were reaching towards something. The emptiness seemed to take those who had stopped reaching. That theory was cruel and incomplete. Children went empty. People with plans went empty. Wanting was not immunity. At best, it bought time. Still, time was the only weapon we had. I began making Junie's days unpredictable. Not random for its own sake, specific, present. I asked questions that could not be answered from habit. What exactly did the clouds resemble? Which fence board would she paint blue? If she could keep one sound from childhood, which one? I made her choose, notice, argue, and remember. We sneaked into the swim center after hours and jumped into the pool wearing clothes. We climbed halfway up the water tower before sense returned to me. I drove Dad's truck around the reservoir at 20 miles an hour with no license, while Junie laughed so hard she hiccuped. We cooked pancakes for dinner and soup for breakfast. We took a different route home every day. At night, I made her tell me 3 things she wanted tomorrow. At first, she enjoyed it. Then she understood why I was doing it. "You're checking me," she said one night. "No. You are. You keep making me prove I'm here." I could not deny it. "Do you think I'm going away?" "No." That was too fast. She turned her face to the wall. Her presence still filled the room, hurt and furious. That anger comforted me. I told her the truth. Wanting might slow it. I did not know if it could stop it. She listened, then gave me tomorrow's 3 things anyway. Cherry soda, a green ribbon, and to see a fox. We found no fox. I drove her past the edge of town looking for one, and that was how I discovered the boundary. At the northern road, just before the county marker, the pressure in my chest eased. Bellweather's cold had become so constant that I had stopped noticing it, like the smell of your own house. 100 yards beyond the sign, I could breathe deeply for the first time in weeks. Junie felt it too. "Stop!" I pulled onto the shoulder. We stood in a field beyond the town limit. Cicadas screamed in the trees. A truck passed, and I felt the driver's presence for one bright second through glass and distance. The sensation was so ordinary that it made me cry. "We should keep going," Junie said. I wanted to, but we had no money, no clothes, and no idea where to go. Dad would report the truck stolen. I imagined police bringing us back and delivering us to our smiling, empty parents. I promised Junie we would prepare first. That delay nearly killed her. Kesia's family planned to move in July. Her father had accepted a job 3 states west, months before any of us noticed the emptying. Their house filled with boxes. A moving truck arrived on a Wednesday. To Kesia, the move became proof that Bellweather could be escaped. "Come with us," she told me behind the pump house. "Both of us? I'll make them take Junie. Your parents won't agree. They agree with everything now." Her parents had gone empty the week before. On moving day, Tobin, Junie, and I waited near the northern road. Kesia rode in the passenger seat of the family car behind the truck. She pressed both palms to the window when she saw us. The moving truck reached the municipal sign. Its brake lights came on. The driver sat there for almost a minute, though the road was empty. Then the truck turned into a gravel lot and made a slow circle. Kesia's father followed. They drove back toward town. Kesia called me from the car. Her voice shook. "Dad says the job changed." "When?" "He doesn't know." "Tell him to turn around." I heard her pleading. Her father answered in the calm tone adults use when they have already decided. "It makes more sense to stay," he said. Kesia shouted at him. She grabbed the wheel. The car swerved, stopped, and then continued toward Bellweather. The next morning, the boxes were unpacked in their original rooms. Her father returned to his old job without calling anyone. The moving company collected the truck. According to every later record, the Wynn family had never scheduled a move. Kesia was still present when she called me that evening, but weaker. For the first time, I had to concentrate to feel her through the phone. "I think it noticed," she said. "What noticed?" "Whatever makes staying feel easier." I told her to come to our house. She said she was tired and would meet us in the morning. At 10 the next day, she sat behind the swim center counter with an architecture brochure hidden inside a magazine. The lobby was cold. I stood in front of her for several seconds before she looked up. "You okay?" she asked. They were the same words she had spoken the first time we admitted the truth to each other. "Kesia, what city did you want to live in?" She smiled, embarrassed. "Bellweather's not so bad." "What city?" "I don't know what you mean." I pulled the brochure from beneath the magazine. She glanced at the photograph of glass towers and drafting tables without recognition. "Is this yours?" "I guess." The scar through her eyebrow was the same. Her hands were the same. The girl I had spent an entire summer wanting was nowhere behind them. She printed Junie's pool ticket and wished us a nice day. That left Tobin. He became more desperate after Kesia disappeared. Wanting had felt like protection. Now it felt like an assignment he could fail. He talked constantly about the dirt bike. He showed me listings, prices, engine sizes, routes he would ride. The desire stopped sounding like his and became a phrase he repeated to keep himself alive. One Friday at the market, we decided to test everyone we passed. The square was crowded with stalls and music. Empty vendors sold tomatoes to empty customers. Empty parents wiped ice cream from empty children's faces. The scene looked warm and busy. My body registered open space. Tobin walked beside me, very close. "Still here?" I asked. "Still here." It was our joke by then, though neither of us laughed. At the hardware stall, he picked up a red-handled wrench. "My dad has one like this," he said. His presence flickered. There is no better word. He did not vanish from the room all at once. For 1 second, I felt him clearly. Then the pressure of him thinned, returned, and thinned again. "Tobin?" "What?" "Tell me what you want." "The bike." "Which one?" "The bike." "What color?" "The one I told you." He set down the wrench. "Still here?" I asked. He smiled, but fear had entered his eyes. "Still here." I took him away from the market. We ran to the baseball field because I wanted a place full of specific memories. I made him stand at shortstop. I threw grounders and asked about the game when he broke his thumb, the dent in his bedroom wall, the name of the dog he had at 5. He answered every question. The answers were correct. He became harder to feel with each one. Memory was not enough. "What are you doing tomorrow?" I asked. "Same thing." "No, pick something." "We could hang out." "Where?" "Anywhere." "Tobin, choose." He grew angry. Real anger, I thought. He shoved me and called me crazy. I shoved him back. For a moment, his presence flared, and hope rose so sharply it hurt. Then Coach Mendez walked onto the field carrying a bucket of baseballs. "Good hustle, boys," he called. It was what he always said. Tobin looked at him. His shoulders relaxed. "We should practice," he said. "No. Coach is here." "Tobin, he isn't." "He's right there." Coach hit a ground ball. Tobin moved automatically. Glove down, feet set, perfect form. He threw to first, where no player waited. Coach hit another. Tobin fielded it. "Still here?" I shouted. He did not answer. The field was empty. I stayed until sunset, while my best friend took ground balls from a man who was not there. They never spoke about why no one covered first base. They repeated the drill until the light failed, then collected the balls and went home. The next day, Tobin called and asked if I wanted to see the dirt bike listing. I went to his house because refusing felt like abandoning his body. We sat on his bedroom floor. He showed me the same advertisement 6 times. Each time he pointed out the price as though it were new. I kept hanging out with the empty shape of my best friend, so my parents would not notice anything had changed. That is a thing I did at 15 that I would not wish on anyone. By the 3rd week of August, it was only Junie and me. Population 2. Bellweather changed after that, though an outsider would not have seen it. Without present people to interrupt routine, the town became smoother. Buses arrived exactly on time. The diner never burned an egg. No one argued at council meetings. Children played games without changing rules. Couples ate at restaurants and never looked at their phones because the habit of conversation continued flawlessly. There were no emergencies. There were also no surprises. At the Friday market, the same woman dropped the same peach at 10:14 in the morning. A man picked it up and handed it to her. They laughed. The next Friday, it happened again at 10:14. At church, the choir repeated the same hymn 3 Sundays in a row. The ice cream truck passed our house at 3:26 every afternoon, even in rain. Junie and I started recording the repetitions. We needed proof, though there was no one left to show. On Monday, a cyclist waved at Dad at 7:08. On Tuesday, the cyclist waved at 7:08. On Wednesday, Dad was still inside, but the cyclist waved at the empty driveway. The town was no longer responding to itself. It was replaying. One evening, a storm knocked out power along the southern blocks. Empty residents came onto their porches and looked toward the dark houses. No one called the utility company because the routine for that exact event had not yet formed. For 5 hours, the southern half of Bellweather stood motionless. People waited in kitchens with dead appliances. Cars remained at intersections where traffic lights had failed. A cashier held out change to a customer who no longer extended a hand. They did not panic. They simply paused where the pattern broke. Junie and I walked down the center of Main Street between stopped cars. Hundreds of faces turned toward us. Not threatening, not curious, waiting. I felt Junie's hand in mine, hot and alive. We were the only motion the town had not rehearsed. Then the electricity returned. Traffic moved. The cashier placed the coins into the customer's palm. Everybody resumed at once. Junie vomited in the gutter. That night she did not give me 3 things she wanted for tomorrow. "I'm tired of wanting," she said. The words frightened me more than anything I had seen on Main Street. I had treated presents like a fire that could be fed forever. But Junie was 9. I had made every day an emergency. I had demanded that she remain loud enough for 2,000 missing people. Her exhaustion was not surrender. It was the cost of my plan. I told her we would leave the next morning. This time, I meant it. We packed clothes, food, Dad's emergency cash, and the folder containing Kesia's repaired list. I hid the bags in the truck. I chose a road south because the northern road was where the Wynn family had turned back. Junie slept in my room so I could feel her beside me. Sometime before dawn, I fell asleep. When I woke, her side of the bed was empty. The kitchen light was on. Junie sat at the table eating cereal. My body flinched at the doorway. The room felt cold. She raised a spoon to her mouth. Milk ran down the side because the spoon was tilted. She did not wipe it away. "Junie?" She looked at me and smiled. "Morning, Deck?" The words had the right shape. No pressure came with them. For one horrible second, I believed I was too late. Everyone who had gone fully empty stayed empty. Kesia had not returned when I showed her the brochure. Tobin had not returned when I named his memories. If Junie was gone, nothing I did next could save her. Then I saw her left hand under the table. Her little finger was tapping against her knee, 3 quick taps, too slow. It was a rhythm she used when she was trying not to cry. The room could not feel her, but some particular piece of her was still pressing against the inside. She was not gone. She was at the threshold. I did not speak gently. Gentleness belonged to the morning routine. I took the cereal bowl and threw it against the wall. It shattered. Milk struck the family calendar. Junie jerked so hard the chair legs scraped backward. A real flinch. "Juniper May Calder," I shouted. Her eyes moved to the broken bowl. Mom entered the kitchen. "Declan, what happened?" I ignored her. I grabbed Junie's shoulders and told her the most specific truths I knew, the time she wet herself at the parade and I gave her my jacket, the imaginary horse named Pepperglass, the lie she told about the broken lamp, the exact words of our fight last Christmas, the green ribbon she had wanted, the fox we never found. I did not ask what she remembered. The emptied remembered everything. I asked what she wanted next. "Junie, we're leaving today. You and me. I need you to choose the first place we go." "School," she said pleasantly. "No, that's the pattern." Mom touched my arm. "You're upsetting her." I pulled away. "Cherry soda or orange?" Junie's face remained calm. "Either." "Wrong? Purple hair or green?" "Both are nice." "Wrong." Her little finger tapped again under the table. "You wanted to see a fox," I said. "You were angry because I kept checking you. You told me I made you prove you were here. Be angry again. I need you angry." Her eyes filled with tears. Mom said my name in a warning voice. "Junie, I cannot carry you out if you don't want somewhere to go. Pick something. Pick anything." Her mouth opened. For a moment, nothing came. Then she whispered, "Ocean?" She had never seen it. "What?" "I want to see the ocean." The kitchen warmed, not all at once. First around her hands, then her face, then the whole small, furious weight of her slammed back into the room. Junie gasped as though surfacing from deep water. She looked at Mom, looked at the cereal dripping down the wall, and screamed. I held her. She was there, fully, painfully there. She had not returned from emptiness. Nobody ever did. I had caught her during the last narrow moment before the door closed, when the room had lost her, but she had not yet lost herself. That distinction is why she lived. We ran. The bags were already in Dad's truck. I took his keys from the hook. Mom followed us to the porch, not frightened, only concerned. "You'll be late for school," she called. Dad came around the side of the house carrying a garden hose. "Where are you going, kiddo?" "The ocean," Junie said. Dad smiled as if she had made a joke. I started the truck. We drove south through streets beginning their morning routines. Mr. Ferris turned on the diner sign. Coach Mendez unlocked the equipment shed. Tobin rode his bike toward school and lifted one hand when he saw us. I nearly stopped. Junie grabbed the wheel. "Deck?" I kept driving. At the square, the market stalls were being erected even though it was Tuesday. The same peach woman stood beside the same crate. The town had begun repeating whole days out of order. Cars filled the road ahead. For one moment, I thought Bellweather was blocking us. Then I saw that every vehicle had stopped at a green light. A delivery truck waited first in line. Its driver stared forward, hands at 10 and 2. The routine required the light to change. It had changed, but no present mind had noticed. I drove onto the sidewalk. The truck clipped a mailbox and scraped a parked car. Bodies turned their heads as we passed. None moved to stop us. The municipal sign appeared beyond the last gas station. "Welcome to Bellweather, population 2017. Junie chanted, "Ocean, ocean, ocean," not like a spell, but like a destination. The steering wheel pulled in my hands near the county line. That is the one physical detail I have never explained. The road was dry. There was no wind. Still, the truck drifted toward the gravel lot, where the wind-moving truck had turned around. My arms felt heavy. A thought entered my mind with the voice of common sense. We had no plan. We needed more money. It would be easier to leave tomorrow. I heard myself say, maybe we should. Junie slapped me, hard. "Ocean." I looked at her, shocked and angry. The anger was mine. I pressed the accelerator. We crossed the line. The pressure released so suddenly that the truck swerved. I pulled onto the shoulder, and we fell out onto the grass. Junie laughed and cried at the same time. I lay beside her under an ordinary sky and felt cars pass on the highway, each containing a person, each presence brief and warm. Behind us, Bellweather looked unchanged. Sprinklers turned. School buses moved. The ice cream truck began its 4-note song, though it was not yet 9 in the morning. By the town's records, Junie and I never left. Dad reported us present on every school absence call. Mom renewed our library cards. The utility account at our house listed 4 occupants for another 11 years. When a state investigator eventually searched the property, he found my bedroom clean, my baseball glove oiled, and Junie's bed made. Our bodies were gone, but Bellweather's routines had kept our places occupied. That is why the official statement remains true. No resident was recorded leaving Bellweather. Junie and I reached the ocean 2 days later. We did not find our parents' real selves. I searched for years, though I knew before I began that there was nowhere to look. Whatever disappeared from a person in Bellweather did not travel to another place. It did not wait in a basement or beneath a field. The bodies left behind contained every memory and none of the one who had lived it. My parents called for a long time. Mom left messages on my birthday. Dad asked about school and reminded me to change the oil. Their voices aged. They sounded warm, ordinary, and proud. I stopped answering because you cannot grieve someone who keeps calling. Junie grew up. She has children now. She lets them become bored. That is important. We learned that a life cannot remain an emergency forever. Presence is not constant excitement, and routine is not evil. The danger was never serial, work, hymns, or familiar roads. It was the moment habit continued after the person inside it stopped choosing. Bellweather is still there. Satellite photographs show maintained lawns and traffic in the square. Property taxes are paid. The town submits annual budgets. Its website lists a population of 2017 and invites visitors to the Friday market. I have never gone back. 3 years ago, a blank postcard arrived with a Bellweather postmark. On the picture side was the municipal sign. Someone had crossed out 2017 and written 0 beneath it. There was no message. Junie asked whether I thought a real person had sent it. I told her I did not know. That is the honest ending. I saved one person because, for one last second, she was still inside herself enough to want the ocean. We crossed a line that 2,000 others never crossed, and the town continued without us. Every light stayed on, every body stayed warm, and nobody was there.